So we're in the middle of a book of Acts. We're taking a break. We're jumping onto a new series. It's only 4 parts before we jump onto another one that will carry us to the end of the year. So we're going to be looking at the gospel story specifically through Psalms. So these coming weeks, 4 weeks, we're going to look at different Psalms, how these different Psalms unfolds the redemptive historical story or the gospel story, the gospel narrative of the Bible. Okay? Now, every good story has 3 parts at least. There are more, but at least has these 3 parts. It has the beginning, it has the middle part, and it has an ending. Every story has at least a good one anyway, right? Of course, there's some, indie writer or indie movie that basically just stuff it up in a way to not conform to that, regardless of whether they start with an ending or a middle or end with the beginning. Whatever it is, they jump up. They need an introduction. They need a beginning, they need a middle part, they need an ending. Now imagine reading a story. You pick up a book, reading a story or whatever it is, and it's missing a part. It doesn't matter which part. It's missing a part, whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end. What happened if that's if you pick up a book that has a missing part? What happened? Well, you become disoriented, right? You do not know what is happening here. Who is this guy? Where did he go? You just become disoriented. You don't know what happened. It will be very frustrating when a story has a missing part. Now, the same is true with the Bible. The Bible has parts, and the gospel story basically try to help us understand the parts of the Bible. Now, before we get into the actual gospel story in Psalms, or the gospel story in general, before we get into the gospel story in Psalms, I want to share a little bit about our Bible. Because if you don't understand the Bible, that has one whole story. The Bible has one whole story, one gospel story. But it has 66 books. So when we look at the book of Acts, for example, or Exodus, it's like in the middle of something, of a story. When we don't understand where it fits, it can be disoriented for us. When we don't understand the whole picture, the narrative story, when we pick one verse or one book, even one book can be disorienting. If you pick just Acts, for example, it can be disorienting. Let alone, if Christian, we pick just one verse of the Bible and say, that's my verse. What does it mean that's your verse? It has to fit in a bigger picture of a story, a narrative story, right? So let me start with the Bible. Our Bible has 66 books, 39 of the Old Testament, 27 of the New Testament, and it has over 40 human authors written these 66 books, written over a period of 1,500 years. That's our Bible. Imagine how irresponsible it is for us to just pick a verse or a passage out of context. How disorienting it is if you don't know where it fits in the larger book. Yet, over 66 books, over 1,500 years of period, it being written by over 40 authors, there's only one overarching story. And that story is the gospel story. Why? Well, because there's only one divine author. One author, one divine author, using over 40 human authors. So there's one story, gospel story. Now it leads us to gospel story in Psalms. Even though the whole Bible itself gives us this story of the gospel, we can trace that even in Psalms. Psalm is unique in that sense. It's a poetry, a book on poetry. And there's parts in this gospel story. The minimum, I would say, some people say 2 parts, 3 parts, but I would say 4 parts minimum. That's what we're going to look at. There are 5 parts gospel story and 6-part gospel story. The best, I think the neatest way of splitting this gospel story is probably in 5 parts. But I only have 4 weeks, so I'm going to do it in 4 parts, okay? So what are the 4 parts of the gospel story? The first one is creation. That's the beginning. The second part is fall. And the third part is redemption. And then the fourth part is new creation. Okay, so that's the 4-part story that we're going to look at. Creation this week. Next week we're going to look at fall. And then we're going to look at redemption the week after that. And then the 4th week we're going to look at the new creation. Now, if it is a 5-part gospel story, which is ideal, I wish I had 5 weeks to do this, then there's this thing called renewal part that fits within the 3rd and the 4th part. Okay, so after redemption, there's this renewal part. That's where the church comes in. And the new creation, which is when Christ returns. That makes sense? So that's the gospel story. There's a beginning, there's a creation, and then there's fall, there's sin, and then there's redemption, Christ came, and then there's renewal, that's the additional part, where we live right now, and then there's a new creation when Christ returns. So that's the gospel story, and we're going to look at that through Psalms exclusively. So today is part 1 for us, that is creation, and we're going to look at Psalm 8. Psalm 8 is the Psalm of praise. It's a Psalm of praise. There's different type of Psalms, and one of them is Psalm of praise, and Psalm 8 is one of Psalm of praise. Let me ask these questions now. I think it's appropriate to ask because we're looking at Psalm of praise. How do you describe your life? Is your life dominated by praise and thanksgiving? If you look at your life, is it full of praise and thanksgiving in your life, generally speaking, or it is dominated by disappointments and dissatisfactions? So in general, your life, if you think about your attitude towards life and your life, is it full of praise and thanksgiving? Do you put on smile, lots of smile, or is like a lot of, life is tiring, it's a disappointment, like recent, we all know, we talk about this, I think, before, even when we set up. I look at my social media, there's a lot of disappointments recently because people can't get Taylor Swift's tickets, right? Life is full of disappointments. Which one are you, if you look at your life? Say, it's raining today, I cannot do what I need to do. Whatever it is life full of disappointments to you, or of praise and thanksgiving? If we look at Psalm 8, we're going to look at Psalm 8 today. It is placed in the middle. It's very interesting, its placement, because it is placed in the middle of Psalms of laments. So if you look at 5 Psalms before Psalm 8, Psalm 3 to Psalm 7, they are Psalm of laments. And then if you look at 5 Psalms forward, Psalm 9 to Psalm 13, they're also Psalm of laments. Why do the editor of Psalms put a Psalm of praise in the middle of so many Psalm of laments? Well, I think it tries to tell us that even in the midst of suffering and heartache and disappointments that never seems to end, we can still give praise to God. That giving praise, this posture of thanksgiving and praise, has nothing to do with what you are going through in life. So Psalm of praise in Psalm 8 is teaching us that there's constant thing in this life that help us to have this life of posture of thanksgiving and praise, regardless of what we are going through in life. And what is that? Isn't it amazing though, right? If you have that one thing that you know you can hold on to, that will never change, that you can always thankful for and give praise for, that is not fragile. Imagine if you're only glad when the weather is nice, then, Melbourne is probably the worst city to be in, right? Like your mood is only cheerful when it's sunny out there. Well, we don't get much sun here. But so people change. People say, well, what makes me happy is when I can binge watch. As long as I've got Netflix, I can binge watch. Well, there's only so much binge watching you can do until there's no more series that you love to watch, right? There'll be a point where you watch the last episode, and then what? Or some say, well, for me, happiness and joy comes when I have a good job, have a good career. But hey, we all know if you work long enough, there's no job that is so secure that you can depend on it with your life. But Psalm 8 teaches us there's this one thing that is so solid, such a solid foundation that we can hold on to as our source of thanksgiving and praise in our life. And the editor of Psalms put it in the middle of these other Psalms of laments. So, my thesis is this, as we look at Psalm 8 this morning, that your dissatisfaction in life is the result of improper worship in your life. If there's any dissatisfaction in your life that you are disappointed with, it's because of the improper worship in your life. And this improper worship happens when you misunderstand who you are, where you are, and the reason for your existence. Let me say that again. So the result, I think this is my thesis. Any dissatisfactions in your life is the result of improper worship. And this improper worship happens when you misunderstood or you don't understand who you are, where you are, and the reason for your existence. Okay? And I think Psalm 8, I believe, addressed this very issue. So let us consider the three parts of the story to help us break down this Psalm 8. So we're going to look at three parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Okay? The first part is the beginning. And each of these parts reveals this solid foundation. And this solid foundation is God Himself. So every part of this story reveals who He is to us. So the beginning. Now, everything has a beginning. And David wrote in this psalm in verse 8 in this way. Verse 3. Psalm 8, verse 3. So let me jump a couple of verses down. Verse 3 says this: When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. Now, let's stop there. This is important. Why? Because it gives us context. It gives us context, and context matters. David said, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. Well, the context matters because the context helps us how we should feel. You know, whether you should feel disappointed or happy. Why? Well, it depends on the context, right? So the context helps us how we should feel and what we should do. Not only how we should feel and what we should do. That's what the context does for us. And this sets the stage, sets the context for us. I'm going to explain. And I'm going to illustrate first so we understand how important this is. Let me ask you a simple question. What do you do if you see a tiger, a real live tiger, staring down at you? What do you do? Well, it depends on the context, right? The context helps you whether you should be happy to see a tiger staring down at you or you should be terrified. Well, if you're in a zoo and a tiger staring down at you, you should be happy. You whip out your camera. It's like, take a selfie with the tiger. Rather than, sometimes you go to a zoo, the tiger was asleep and hiding in the back, right? But if you see a tiger in the wild, on the loose, staring down at you, you should be terrified. It's the same thing. You met a tiger, one make you terrified, the other one make you happy. One makes you want to run, the other one makes you want to take a photo with it. Context help us with how we should feel and what we should do. when David wrote this in verse 3, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, it gives us this foundation, gives us this context, how we should feel about our life and what we should do with our life. Give us that context. Many of us experience disappointment and dissatisfaction because we don't understand the important cosmic context. We understand our little context. All of us have our own context, right? If you're single, your context is you and your housemates or you and your work. If you're married, your context is you and your wife. If you have children, and then your context is a bit bigger, that's you are a person with children. All of us have context. When you go to work, you have your own context. But that's a little context. The reason many of us are disappointed, dissatisfied, is because we don't get this cosmic context that David is talking about. If you understand this, which we're going to look at, then perhaps my prayer is then you'll be less dissatisfied and perhaps, hopefully, have more contentment in your life. What is David says here in verse 3 is basically this, that everything has a beginning. Everything has a beginning, and the beginning of everything is God. Everything has a beginning, and that beginning is God. Now, what David wrote here maps or looks back really to what is written in the beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1 and 2. So if you read Psalm 8, you basically get a poetry version of Genesis 1 and 2, the account of creation in the beginning. It says this, Genesis 1 and 2. So this is the very first verses in our Bible. It says this, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. That's the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. Similarly, John in the New Testament opens the book of John. This is the first couple of verses in the book of John, in the Gospel of John. It says this, in the beginning was the Word. What is this Word? Well, it says the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. What he's trying to say, in the beginning there's only one. In the beginning there's God and nothing else. That's our context. Everything that comes into being, you and I, everything that we come to know, is a creation of God. So when you find it to be difficult to be content in life and thankful, it's because we don't understand this context. That we think, we don't understand that this cosmic context of God, the big God, the majestic God, the Creator, there was nothing before Him. And in comparison to that, we're so small. Do you know the closest star, you know how close it is to us? It's 4 light years away. That's the closest to us, and there are billions of that. And God said a word, and it came into being. And that's our context. We are so tiny, we are like nothing in the context of the cosmic creation of how majestic God is. See, do you find it hard to be content, to be thankful in your life? And are you more likely to be dissatisfied? Almost like, if that's not you, at least I would say, you know someone like that, right? There's always something that they can complain about. or dissatisfied about. See, the solutions for, if you're like that, or if you know someone like that, the solution is not to have more or better things in life, because that is temporary fix. That's not the solution, and that's actually not the root issue. That's not the problem. Rather, what we need is to grasp this context in your life, that in the beginning there was God and nothing else. And that's all that matters in this life. Now, the story of the beginning tells us not just there's a God, but there is this powerful God. He's just not any being. He's a powerful being, a divine being. God was the origin of everything, including your life and my life. Now, what does that mean though? If God is the beginning and everything else come to being because God says so, what does it mean about you and me today? What does it mean? Well, it means this, that your life has meaning. That you are created with purpose. That your life was not random. Imagine doing something without purpose. We are created in the image of God. That's why we love to create things. That's why we love to make things in our life. Whether making things as in innovate in a technological sense, or innovate in a medical sense, or even baking. The act of baking and cooking, that's the act of creating that we inherit from God, you see. Now, when we cook, I'm sure even though not all of us are great cook, but we know somehow we can cook a little bit, right? All of us can cook a little bit. When you, especially if you're really good, when you cook, you don't just cook. You try to make it delicious. You try to make it presentable. You don't just say, well, in the end, it's going to be the same anyway. In the tummy, they're all going to get mixed up and all those stuff. So it doesn't matter what you put in it. Just here, take a spoon of salt. Here, take a spoon of flour. Here, just all the ingredients. Just eat it. You don't do that, do you? We make it. We make it beautiful. We make it tasty. Because we are creator in a sense. There's a purpose in doing that. Now, if we understand this great cosmic, there's a beginning God who create. Now we begin to understand that our life is not random. That God created us specifically. Like it's not like God said, oh, I'm going to create human being. I'm just going to make everyone looks the same color of hair, nose and face, and everyone just like clones. God didn't do that. Because He created us with purpose, you see. So even then, Psalm 8, in the context of where this psalm sits, help us to understand, yes, even in the midst of suffering and hardship in life, even in that, there's a purpose. Now, of course, we may not know what's the purpose. God may not tell us, but there is a purpose. If we know, then that's great. But if we don't, it's fine because of this context that God is there and we are created with purpose. I don't want you to miss this. It's small in this verse, but it's magnificent. It's beautiful. So I want you to see this in verse 3 that we have looked at. It says, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, you have set in place. See, everywhere else, when you read the Bible, it's always say the work of your hands. And that's a common term to say the work of your hands. Here, it say the work of your fingers. When do you describe things when you do with hands and when you do with fingers? Have you been doing things? Any of you like those miniatures thing, little painting and little characters and hobby thing, right? You don't use hand, you use fingers. You even need tweezers to do that, right? If you look at Master Chef, food, they use tweezers to put this little leafy thingy on the, right? That that a lot of people just put it aside when they don't even want to eat it. But why they do that? With their fingers not even small enough to do that, they use tweezers to do that, to make it beautiful, intricate. And that's what David is saying. When he looked at the heavens, the creation, what he saw is the work of God's fingers. It's not a rough work. It's not a rough work of hand, but it's an intricate, delicate, beautiful work of God's very fingers. So that's one way we could read this. And there's another way we could read this. It's like it is just God's finger. He doesn't need to move his whole arm to do. Do you see that? Do you see how powerful God is? For the whole thing, this beautiful, amazing universe and everything that is in it, he only needs his fingers. Doesn't even need his arm or hand, just his fingers. It wasn't hard work for God. He is that powerful. And that sets the context for us as we live our life and we look at that. This is the God we worship. How can we not be thankful and grateful and full of praise? So that's the beginning. How about the middle? So the beginning story tells us this powerful God. And the middle tells us a little bit more. Not that he's only powerful, but he's also personal. It says in verse 9, Psalm 8 verse 9. In fact, verse 9 matches verse 1. And this is important. Every time you read the Bible and you find a matching verses, opening and closing, it tells you the meaning of what's inside this passage. So the opening and the ending sounds exactly the same. Verse 9, O Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Verse 1 is the same. Everything in between, all the verses in between, it's about this majestic God. And you see the two different words here, Lord and Lord. Our English translation cannot do any better apart from just making it all capitalized. The first Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. And then another version of Lord with just capital L, sorry. So there's this all caps Lord and just one capital L Lord. The distinction is this: the all cap in at least in ESV translation that we use, whenever you read all these capital L-O-R-D, it's equivalent to, in the Hebrew, will be what we call tetragrammaton, which is the 4-letter word that describe who God is. Well, the name of God, YHWH. Okay, what is that? That is a personal name of God. So when you see that, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, that's God's personal name. And David addressed him as a personal God. He's powerful, but he's personal as well. It reveals, this word reveals the majestic name of our Creator God. One scholar tried to explain, what is this YHWH mean, really? Like, what does this, every name has a meaning, what does it mean? Well, it's really hard, but then people try to discern what it means. But it conveys this idea, that tetragrammaton. It conveys this idea that He is the God who is, and who will continue to be. He never was, in the sense that He never not exists. He's always exists and He will continue to exist. That's the idea of capital Lord. YHWH. So it is one thing to know that God was the creator, right? It's great to know that God is the creator, and powerful, but if He's not personal, it has nothing to do with us. He's just a cold, distant God. He could just be a creator, but not personal. David shows us that he's not only that. He's not only powerful and great, but he's also personal. He continues to be involved in the creation of our life. I've just been, as I said before, I've just been to a wedding. And every time you see a wedding, you're just amazed how many moving things in a wedding that need to be organized. And some people organize a year prior to their wedding, just like every little things, the flowers, because if you're the couple who get married, once it sets in motion, right? Once the wedding start, the ceremony start, you cannot do anything anymore. You rely on everyone else or what you have planned to just go as planned, and sometimes it doesn't go as planned. Because if you're the couple who get married, you can't say, I want it there, not there. I want the flowers to be done. I don't want that song. I want this song. It's too late. Right? And if it's so difficult, if you don't trust me, just speak to someone who just got married, how difficult it is to organize everything and how much hours to do it. Imagine to organize this universe. You don't just create it, you gotta run it. And God is in control in that to a personal level. So that's why sometimes it's easy to say, oh, God is this magnificent, majestic God, creator, who created heaven and the earth. But then we put him so far away and so distant away from our life because we think he can't be so personal that he cares about me. Because he's that important, he's that great. He got the universe to run. How about if the sun fall off the sky? How about he forgot to wake up one day and the earth doesn't turn, or whatever it is. Or the birds forgot to wake up one day, or the bees, or whatever it is, just little thing will be out of whack. If it's that hard to organize, imagine God organizing all this. That's why sometimes it's hard for us to believe that it's also personal, to a personal level. That's why God, to show us that he reveals who he is by revealing his name, his personal name to us. Not only he reveals himself by giving his personal name to us, he knows each of us by name as well. That's what the Bible says. And now let's go back to verse 1 and 2. Psalm 8, 1 and 2. O Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. There you go. That's that opening and matching the last verse. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babies and infants, you have established strength because of your foes, to still the enemy and the avenger. To still the enemies and the avenger. With what? With out of the mouth of babies and infants. That's how powerful our God is. God's name is majestic in all the earth, in all creation, basically. That's what it says. He's not only majestic in some parts of creation, but in all creation, he is in charge. Verse 1b, you have set your glory above the heavens. God reveals his glory and therefore his domain, right? For everyone to see. Everyone. And over the centuries, this is why over the centuries there are many people who come to study the creation. Scientists study the creation. Carefully, they have come to know the Creator God. Just by looking at the creation that God has set. You have set your glory above the heavens. So is it possible, in a way, to know that there's creative God who created the universe? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you look at the cells of a leaf, just any random leaf, if you look at it so close to a microscopic level, the intricate details of it, the more you look at, the more you realize there's no way this is happening by chance. Because it's just as ridiculous as saying looking at this, whatever things that we created in this room and say, that's just happened by chance. No one created that. It would be ridiculous to say that. And it's the same for those who look at the creation carefully, down to the microscopic level and say, well, yeah, I know there's a pattern there. It's beautifully symmetrical, but it's just happened by chance. God is showing us here, David is showing us that it is God himself who set his glory in over all creations for us to find him in every single aspect of our life, in everything in our life. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, write this in Romans 1, verse 19. For what can be known about God is plain to them, to everyone, because God has shown it to them. How? To everyone? For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power, divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. Paul says the same thing, what David says. So if you look carefully, everywhere you look in creation, you'll see God's fingerprints. So no one is without excuse to not bow down and worship this God, majestic God creator. So importantly, what does it mean for you? This is all very theologically nice to know, but what does it mean for you? Right? That's why we're here. We want to know, how does the Bible speaks to us? How can I live I have to go to work tomorrow. I've got a terrible boss. Whatever it is that you're going through in life, what does it mean then? What does it mean for you? Well, it means you belong to God, who reveals himself to you, and he knows you by name. And that's what it means, and that matters more than anything in this world. The middle part of the story, of the gospel story in this passage, tell us that God is not only powerful, but he's also personal. And that's important, because if he is powerful and not personal, then it has nothing to do with us. He doesn't care about us. He's too important to care about us, but he's not. Abraham Kuyper, a Dutch prime minister and a theologian, he says this, famous quote from him: there is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is not sovereign, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. There's nothing. There's not even a square inch of this whole domain of human existing that Christ doesn't cry out, mine. Because there's no one, no existence before God. He made everything into existence. So all your life, your work, your relationship, your finances, everything belongs to God. Your hope and future is in his hand. Now, this is assuring, I hope. It is assuring to me to know that I'm okay. Whatever that you are going through right now, whatever state of life that you are in right now, you're okay if you're in God's hand. That everything is okay if you're in God's hand. Because God is powerful, and he was there from the beginning, and he's a personal God. And that you don't have to be a God for yourself. Sometimes we like to be a God for ourselves. We like to fight for ourselves, thinking that we are on our own. When David says, God, you are this majestic God who created everything, he's saying to us, you are fine. If you're in my hand, I'll care for you. What are you so worried about in your life? Before there was anything, I was there, God says. And I'll be there for eternity long. Now, if God is in control, and he say you're okay because you are in his hand, it means this: you don't have to be in control. You don't have to fight God to be in charge of your life. And some of you perhaps feel a bit uneasy about that because you like to get your hands dirty. You want to get a sense of control of your life. But God says, I'm a good God who loves you. In fact, when you have someone like that in your life, you don't want to be in control, do you? Imagine driving down an unknown terrain, street, roads. Let's say you're on a road trip. It was treacherous. It was like stormy. It was dark, winding road, narrow. To your left was basically you plunge to your death over the cliff. If you just miss a little bit, slippery road. If in your car at that time there is this expert driver, professional, who's been driving professionally, racing all his life, won't you say, hey, I know I'm good at driving, but I'm not as good as you. Here you go. Can you drive? We'll do that, right? And he's not God. That person is not God. Yet we will feel safer if he's on the driving seat, in the driver's seat, because of the condition. Now God is telling us, because if he's in control, when we feel the urge to take the wheel, God says, hey, you don't have to. I'm here for you. And another example. Imagine if you need a tumor to be removed from your brain. What would you need? Well, you're not, especially if you're not a neurosurgeon, would you do it yourself? You wouldn't, would you? You wouldn't do it yourself. You say, I have no clue about brain or tumor. You would let a neurosurgeon to do that for you, who spent all his life studying and practicing of removing tumor from the brain. You would do that. So some days, my brothers and my sisters, when you don't feel like showing up in life, when you're unwell, when people around you disappoint you, when life disappoints you, when as if the whole universe is against you, when you feel like, man, this is too much, you just feel like hiding under your blanket and cry. When you feel that way, David teach us one thing. He said, look up, look at the moon, look at the stars. That should bring comfort and assurance. And out of that, when you look at the sky, when you look at the moon and the stars, it should remind you of a powerful God who loves you, who gives his name to you and knows you personally. And then out of this heart can flow thanksgiving and praise. When you feel like curling up, David says, look up to the sky. Look at the moon and the stars. That was God, the work of his fingers. This is how it ends, the end. So that's the middle. The end reveals another part of our God. If God is majestic and all-powerful, why would he care? Why would he give his name to you? Who are you? Who am I? If he's all that, why would he care? See, David thought the same about this. He said, God, when I look at the moon and the stars and the heavens and the glory that you reveals, if there's someone so important, just walk in here, so famous, so important, first question is that why would that person be here even? Right? Let alone at the end of the service, shake your hand and want to know your story or want to hear what did you eat for breakfast. Why would he care? That's precisely it. If that's someone famous, we can't even comprehend to be with us here right now in this church or talk to us after church because he's so important. How about this God who is so majestic, so awesome? Why would he care? That should be in your mind, in my mind. That's certainly in David's mind when he wrote this. He says this in verse 4. What is man that you are mindful of him, that the Son of Man that you care for him? It's like, God, you are this, but me? Why bother? Who am I? And this is why understanding this and what God reveals himself. Of course, David doesn't get the full picture, but we do. He doesn't get the full picture, but we do. Because compared to the moon and the stars, David knows who are that majestic, the heavens. And look at himself, his life, he's like a speck of dust. We can't even explore the depth of our own ocean. That is nothing compared with the moon and the stars, the sky, the galaxies. We can't even explore our own galaxy, and there are billions of those galaxies. The more you understand God's creation, the more we realize how small we are, even smaller, tinier than a speck of dust. That's why David says, what is a man that you are mindful of him, that a son of man that you care for him? And James, the brother of Jesus, says this in chapter 4, James 4:14. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Since you popped up, you breathe your life, you live a short 80 years, and you're back to the ground. Just like that. Have you seen this? There's a funny but true video clip, an old one, of somebody. It started with a hospital, in a scene in a hospital, a woman giving birth. And pop out quickly, the baby, out, shoot through the sky, through life, like growing up through life, working or studying, working, get married and everything really fast, and then boom, in a few seconds, back into the ground, dead. That's our life. It's just flashes like that. Yeah, what did God do for you and me? For someone who is that speck of dust. Let's read the bulk of the Psalm 8. It says this from verse 5. Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen. And also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heaven and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. God sees you. God knows your name. He crowns you with glory and honor. This little speck of dust means a lot to God. He crowns you with glory and honor. He made you only a little lower than the heavenly beings. Now, these heavenly beings, it's a tricky one to translate. It's a tricky word. It's a common word, you see. That's why it's tricky. When it's common word, it can means a lot of things. So, ESV say heavenly beings. Other translations translate it as angels, gods, God. You name it. Different English translations have different words try to describe these heavenly beings. But the meaning is the same. The meaning is clear that God made you a little lower than those in the heavenly realm. Just a little lower. You are that precious. This little speck of dust is important and precious to God. So you're not just slightly better version of animal. You're not just an animal with brain. You are made precious. God look at you and say it is good, that his creation is good. You are valuable. But note this though, you are valuable not because of what you've done, but because God made you that way. Don't miss that. You are valuable and precious, though a speck of dust, because God made you that way. Sometimes we are not satisfied with that. It's a simple message, but it's powerful if we understand this concept of the majestic God creator and who we are in context of that God who is so powerful and majestic. We're just a speck of dust, but precious to him. So we don't have to be worried about anything. We don't have to be in control because this God is in control, you see. Now, sometimes we like to perform. We like to do things to improve, quote unquote, improve this speck of dust. Do you think it's going to help? God have made you beautiful and precious in his eyes. What improvement can you make in order that when God look at you, you're slightly better now? Is that why we think we can outdo or improve what God has done in our lives? See, that's absurd. That's ridiculous. Now, I like this, what I'm going to share with you next, because it rings true to how often we think about ourselves. See, one of the most popular first cars for Asian, at least anyway. The reason I'm thinking about this because Judah is turning 16 and he say, my son, eldest, he's turning 16 and he say, want to learn to drive, right? As soon as he hits 16, he say, want to learn to drive. And I think about the most popular first car for Asians that I know is this car called Honda Civic, right? Why is it popular? Well, it's reliable. It's reliable. But that's the problem. And because it's reliable and it's plentiful, it's affordable, it's cheap, it's reliable. But this is the problem. If you look at any Asians who drive Honda Civic, they all look different from one to another. Why? Why do you think so? They modified the car like crazy. They change everything. They accessorize everything. They have full body kit. They have spoiler that is as high as the tower of whatever it is. It's ridiculous, right? They change the color here and there. They accessorize everything. It's Honda Civic still, but they change everything. They modified everything. You do that with Honda Civic as your first car that you bought secondhand. That if you had a major accident, you say, well, it's cheaper to just chuck it away than to fix it. But imagine if you have a Lamborghini or Ferrari. What would you do with it? You don't put anything on it. You just drive it. You don't modify it. You don't accessorize it. You don't say, it would be good if I put another aftermarket spoiler here. You're going to destroy it. You're going to make it look worse. And that's what happened when you try to improve what God has done in your life. You think you're Honda Civic. You try to accessorize yourself. God says, if God is this majestic creator and he say, you are the most precious thing that he has ever created, what else can you do to make yourself pleasing to him, beautiful to him? Nothing. Apart from understanding this context that he is God, he's the creator of this universe and everything that's in it. And he loves you. Now, tell me, if you understand that and you go to work, can you be disappointed? Perhaps. But you still go back to this foundation that is so unchangeable, unshakable, that there's this God who loves you. No big deal if your boss don't like you. You have God who loves and cares for you. When he looks at you, he says, you're beautiful. You're precious. You don't have to put an aftermarket wheels or rear spoiler in your life. You're perfect the way God created you. Understand that. And verse 6, it says this. You have given him dominion over the works of your hand. You have put all things under his feet. That's what God says. He created you and he said, He give you dominion over the works of your hands. I put everything under your feet. Everything that you do will be great and awesome. You will be in total control. Yeah? Well, not really. That's what he says. But if you look at your life, like, no, Lord, I'm struggling. How can you say that I have put everything under my feet when I'm struggling with my life? When I can't even control my children, when I don't even have a stable job, when I don't even have a home, when I don't even have this, or when I still have this sickness, how can you say that you've given me dominion over the works of my hand and put everything under my feet? You say, I'm struggling. This is not true. Well, you are right. You are right, because that's not who we are right now. And but that's okay, because there's someone who is, and his name is Jesus. Now, the author of Hebrews picked this up, Psalm 8. He picked this right up in Hebrews 2, verse 6 to 9. He says this, and you'll notice even the way he writes it, it's very similar to Psalm 8. And he gives us an explanation of how we could understand this. What is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? Sound familiar? You made him a little while lower than the angels. Here, he used the word angels instead of heavenly beings. You have crowned him with glory and honor, put everything in subjection under his feet. So far, so good, the same. But yet that's not true with your life and my life, right? Now putting in everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside his control. Hang on, that's not true, God. I can't even get Taylor Swift tickets. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. That's what he says. He gives us an explanation. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. But we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. Do you see that? He said, yes, you can't do that. Not now. But there's someone who did in your place. Someone who's actually greater than the heavenly beings, greater than the angels. But God made him slightly lower just to be like you and me, just a little lower than heavenly beings. And he died on your behalf so that you don't have to taste death. So what the author of Hebrews is saying is this. You read this amazing God, this majestic God in Psalm 8. The authors of Hebrews say, I got a name for you, and his name is Jesus. Now, if the name Yahweh is personal, name of God, it gets even more personal now. Because it's not just a distant God who set everything in motion, but he gets involved in his creation. He put himself in the creation. And his name is Jesus. Now, it was a big deal, right, for you and I to be created just a little lower than the heavenly beings. It was a big deal. But for God, for Jesus, it was the opposite. It was not a big deal. It was a humiliation. The God that created this majestic God to be made a little lower than the heavenly beings. It was humiliation for him to suffer death. And not only death, but death on the cross. So this is the message for us. That God is not only powerful and personal. The ending of the story tells us one more thing, right? About this majestic creator. That he's passionate God who loves you. He sends his son to die for you. To do what you cannot do for yourself. God created you. He sustains you. He died for you so that you don't have to. If you understand this context, the majestic God who loves you and cares for you, you don't have to go around and live your life to please any other human beings. You'll be a person to be so thankful, and you always put this smile on your face. Because every time life try to put you down, circumstances force you to go and hide under your blanket, you go out there and look up to the sky and you see the moon and the stars. And again, you're being reminded this amazing God who loves you enough to send His Son to die for you. You don't have to crave acceptance from anyone. You don't have to achieve anything for God to love you more. If you're going through difficult times right now, I may not know why you're going through it and the reason that God let you going through that. But I know this, that it's not because He doesn't love you. And it's not because He doesn't care. And it's not because He's so far removed that He doesn't know that that's what you're experiencing right now. It's none of that. So let us pray.